Economic inequality is a major concern in the country. There are high levels of unemployment and poverty, and people believe government should be doing more to address this. A recent Afrobarometer survey shows that South Africans' trust in a variety of institutions is at its lowest since 2006. Trust in elected representatives is especially at an all-time low. Let's discuss this with Jan Hofmeyr from the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. Jan, thank you for your time. So it would seem distrust all round. Trust is waning in institutions, the various institutions. You surveyed the sentiment around 17 institutions in our democracy. What is the broad picture that emerges?
Yes, good morning, Tilasizwe, and thank you very much for having me. Yes, well, the broad picture is that we've been measuring trust in a variety of institutions within the judicial, executive, and legislative arms of government since 2006. And what we have seen this year is that trust levels for all of those institutions in those various sectors have reached historic lows since we started measuring them.
And what were the specific kind of questions you were asking people to answer? For instance, around, let's take the president, for example, around whom you found that about 38% of the people that you spoke to said that they trust the president somewhat or trust the president a lot. What were some of the questions from which you could distill this 38% level of trust in the president?
Indeed. So we ask a battery of questions around those particular institutions, but then we also ask questions of individual leaders. And so what we've seen is that particularly institutions that are elected, so elected democratic institutions, have suffered the most in terms of the trust deficits that we've seen over these past sort of 21 or 20 odd years that we've been measuring them. And this poses real questions about the viability of our democracy or representative democracy. Another dimension that I thought was also really interesting is that our Constitution also provides for a number of checks and balances on power in the system, such as Chapter 9 institutions, the Public Protector, the Independent Electoral Commission. And also those institutions have suffered severe declines in the extent to which South Africans trust them. And I think this is something that we should be concerned about, because I think one might also then start sort of asking these questions about why is it that South Africans go to streets? Why do events such as we have seen in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal over the past month or so happen? And I think one can postulate that these events may to some extent have something to do with the fact that people do not trust their institutions to deliver at a time when people really feel a lot of existential anxiety around their material well-being, but also their psychosocial well-being.
It's an important point that you just made, is it not? Because part of the other challenge is that there's perhaps, at least from the survey that you've done, a sense that there aren't really any political alternatives. The political parties, the governing party, the ANC, as well as opposition, don't fare any better in as far as trust is concerned, do they?
Indeed. We've seen that the number of people who expressed trust in the governing party was about 28%. And what is clear is that opposition parties do not offer an alternative. There we've seen a support or a trust level of about 24%, which is quite low. So then the question becomes, where do people go to when they want their needs addressed, particularly in these times that we find ourselves in? I think maybe another sort of interesting finding, which you may also sort of want to sort of allude to, is the declines of trust that we've seen in the courts and the judicial system. as a way also of dealing with people's primary sort of issues around justice.
Jan, I'm worried about running out of time before I ask you this. I've always had at the back of my mind this suspicion that many South Africans who've never lived in a dictatorship have this pining and this hankering for some kind of a benevolent dictatorship where, you know, people will say, look at that country, the people don't have democracy, but they are thriving, etc., etc. And it seems to be that your survey is to a certain extent confirming my worst fears. What's this about some people saying that they would be okay with foregoing elections in favor of an unelected government as long as it delivers?
That's unfortunately the case. About 67% of our respondents indicated that they would not mind having a strong man or woman as long as their basic needs are being met. And I think this might be also an indication of the desperation that many South Africans find themselves in. And hence it is so important that we start working also on the integrity of our institutions in terms of their delivery, but also oversight and accountability.
Sure, that terrifies me. That really does terrify me. Finally, Jan, talk to me about your findings around the media. Because, you know, the media rightly comes under the spotlight. It's an institution with great, these are institutions with great power in a democracy, as well as great responsibility, not always carried out to the full extent and judicially, but in many instances, those responsibilities are carried out judiciously. But it seems that the broadcast media, in particular, public and private, are trusted.
I think this is the good news, I think, of our findings. For any democracy to function, for it there to be accountability and transparency, you need a robust media. And in our survey, as you've mentioned, the sort of private media comes out on top as the most trusted sources of information that South Africans access for their news and for ways in terms of forming an opinion, shortly followed by government media outlets.
All right. Thank you for that. That's Jan Hofmeyr from the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation talking to us there about that survey, the Afrobarometer survey of the levels of trust in 17 institutions of our democracy that has found that trust levels are really, really low in our society. You're watching All Angles. I'm back with more news for you at the top of the hour.